Ashley Cooper arrives at Oak Creek Memorial at 11:47 p.m., her car still running while she sits in the parking lot for exactly 2 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, counting her breathing the way they taught her in the field. 11:58. She kills the engine. The hospital rises in front of her like a grey monument to forgetting, all fluorescent light bleeding through windows and the distant sound of an ambulance somewhere in the city, still 5 miles out. She's been doing this for 3 years, night shift, always the invisible hours when the administrators sleep and the real work happens in the quiet. Nobody asks questions about night shift nurses. Nobody remembers their names. The employee entrance slides open with a hydraulic sigh and releases a wave of antiseptic so sharp it catches in her throat. Oak Creek Memorial smells like bleach and floor wax and something underneath that's copper and fear, the universal scent of places where people come apart. Ashley moves through the corridors with the kind of stillness that makes people forget she's there. Her scrubs are pressed. Her ID badge is clipped at exactly the same angle every shift. Her hair is pulled back tight enough that it pulls at the skin above her temples, a small controlled pain she uses to stay present. She passes 2 residents arguing about a consult, a nursing student crying in the bathroom hallway, a security guard scrolling his phone at the nurse's station. None of them look up. None of them ever do. The ER is controlled chaos at 1:15 midnight. 5 beds running, 2 traumas, 1 septic shock, and a woman in Bay 3 who's been screaming for 6 hours about kidney stones. Ashley checks in at the main desk where Teresa, the charge nurse, slides her the assignment sheet without making eye contact. Teresa stopped making eye contact with Ashley about 2 months in, around the time she realized Ashley wasn't going to gossip, wasn't going to complain, and wasn't going to do anything interesting enough to talk about in the break room. A ghost in scrubs. That's what Teresa sees, if she sees anything at all. Trauma Bay needs restocking, Teresa says, already turning to the next task. And Monitor Bay 4. The EKG machine's been acting weird. Ashley nods, no wasted words, just action. She's learned that silence is a kind of armor. It's also a kind of erasure, which is exactly what she needs. The trauma bay is empty now, 3 minutes past the last crisis. She moves to the supply cart with the kind of muscle memory that doesn't come from hospital work, the kind that comes from a field hospital in Tikrit where space was measured in feet and every instrument had to be positioned so your hands could find it blind. 7 years ago. 7 years since that last night shift, the one that ended with her name crossed off every roster and rebuilt into someone Ashley Cooper, Jacksonville nurse, civilian, invisible. Her hands move without thinking. She arranges the surgical instruments in ascending order of size, groups the medications by category, positions the 4 kits in the exact configuration she used in 2nd Medical Battalion, the hospital that officially never existed. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like angry insects, and she works through it without hearing it, her hand steady enough to thread a needle while a helicopter landed 12 feet away. She's positioning the last instrument, a 14-gauge angiocath needle, chrome and precise, when she hears the footsteps. Dr. Marcus Ashford arrives at the trauma bay like he owns it, because in a way he does. Chief of Surgery at Oak Creek Memorial, chairman of the surgical committee, the man who signs off on supply orders and staff assignments and the kind of decisions that determine whether people move up or disappear. He's tall in the way that wealth carries itself, expensive watch visible just below his cuff, wedding band that probably cost more than Ashley's entire monthly salary. His eyes move across the trauma bay the way a shark moves through water, checking for weakness, for opportunity, for the kind of small mistakes that justify dominance. Then he stops. He sees the instrument arrangement. He sees the way Ashley has organized the supply cart with the geometric precision of an operating theater, not a hospital storeroom. The tray of sutures arranged by gauge, the bandages stacked in the exact rotation for rapid access, the defibrillator pads positioned at a 45-degree angle next to the monitor. That's not standard procedure, Ashford says. He's not asking. Ashley doesn't look at him. She's restocking the medication drawer, her movements economical. Standard procedure gets people killed in under 2 minutes, doctor. The silence that follows lasts exactly 3 seconds. Then Ashford's jaw tightens, and his eyes narrow with the kind of calculation that means he's already filing this away, already building a narrative that will become useful later. A nurse who questions procedure. A night shift worker who thinks she knows better. A pattern to investigate. Standard procedure exists for a reason, he says, and his voice is the kind of quiet that carries weight. I'd appreciate it if you'd follow it. Yes, doctor. Ashley doesn't add anything else. Just the two words, the kind of deference that sounds like agreement but is really erasure. She moves past him to the medication cart, and she can feel his eyes on her for another long moment before he turns and walks away, his footsteps retreating down the hallway with the particular rhythm of a man who's used to being right. But something has shifted. Some calculation has begun. The rest of the shift moves in the familiar rhythm of night work, a 63-year-old man with chest pain who's actually just anxious, a fall victim who needs monitoring, a UTI that should have been treated at an urgent care and instead occupied a trauma bay for 4 hours. Ashley moves through it all with the invisible efficiency of someone who's learned that the way to survive is to be so useful that firing you becomes inconvenient, and so quiet that nobody remembers you exist. She runs labs, restocks supplies, adjusts medications, holds an elderly woman's hand while her daughter sleeps in the chair beside the bed. At 2:14 a.m., she finds herself back in the trauma bay, checking the instrument arrangement, and she realizes she's reorganized it the way Ashford said it should be. Standard procedure. Everything in the exact reverse order of what would actually work in a crisis. Everything slower, less efficient, designed for the kind of surgery that happens in a planned operating room instead of a dark tent with incoming fire. She rearranges it back to the correct configuration. Muscle memory doesn't change, no matter how hard you try to kill it. By the time the shift ends at 6 a.m., Ashley has worked 14 hours. Her feet ache. Her shoulders are rigid with tension. But more importantly, something in the ER has changed. Ashford has been absent for the last 3 hours of her shift, but she saw him earlier at his office, door closed, laptop lit up, his expression the kind of focused intensity that usually means someone is searching for something. She knows what he's looking for because she knows what he saw, and she knows what it means when someone notices you know things you shouldn't know. In the break room, she sits alone at 6:47 a.m., holding a cracked mug with both hands to stop the tremor in her left hand, nerve damage from a shrapnel wound that never healed quite right. The coffee is cold but she drinks it anyway, staring at nothing, because staring at nothing is easier than staring at the future she can see arriving like a helicopter on the horizon, coming to collect what it lost when she disappeared 7 years ago. The fluorescent light above her flickers once. Twice. Then holds steady. And in his office, Dr. Ashford types her name into a database and finds exactly what he expects to find. Nothing. A complete, convincing civilian history. School records, work history, rental applications. All authentic. All impossible for someone who knows the things she knows. He pulls up her personnel file again, studies her photograph, dark eyes, no expression, the kind of woman who disappears into a room, and he makes a decision. A nurse who organizes instruments like a field surgeon isn't a problem. A nurse who organizes them like a field surgeon and has no verifiable history before 3 years ago is something else entirely. He picks up his phone and makes a note to himself, background check on Ashley Cooper. Need answers. What he doesn't know yet is that those answers are going to cost him everything. The overhead PA crackles through the ER like a voice from another dimension, and the words that emerge are designed to humiliate. Quiet Ashley to the supply closet. Quiet Ashley to the supply closet. The nursing station erupts in barely suppressed laughter. Jennifer, a day shift nurse with the kind of smile that cuts, stage whispers something to the resident beside her, and 3 others smirk behind their charts like they've been waiting for this moment. Ashley sets down her tablet on the counter with deliberate care, takes one measured breath through her nose, and rises from her chair with the kind of stillness that makes people forget she was sitting. She walks past the station with her jaw set and her eyes forward, ignoring the whispers that follow her like smoke, and pushes through the supply closet door into the fluorescent hum of metal shelves and organized chaos. Dr. Ashford is already waiting inside, blocking the light switch with his body, arms crossed over his chest like he owns the room. The space is narrow, 3 feet of breathing room between him and the door, and he hasn't moved. He's positioned himself deliberately. Power move. Control. Your 6-month review came across my desk this morning, he says, his voice surgical and cold, each word calibrated for maximum precision. Your patient interaction scores are concerningly low. You don't speak up in rounds. You don't advocate for your patients. You just exist here. Exist. Like furniture. He leans slightly forward, invading the space between them with the confidence of a man who has never been told no. I'm not sure we can justify keeping someone so thoroughly unremarkable on a trauma rotation. Ashley meets his eyes without blinking. Her hands remain at her sides. She takes one slow breath, the kind of breath that comes before you say something you've been holding back, and when she speaks her voice is so quiet that Ashford has to lean forward to hear it. Sometimes the person who speaks least is the one actually listening, Dr. Ashford. The words hang in the recycled air like a challenge wrapped in civility. His face hardens, jaw clenching, eyes narrowing, and for a moment she watches him process the fact that she pushed back. That she didn't break. That his insult didn't land the way he intended. Your contract is under review, he says, his voice dropping lower, more dangerous. I'm recommending your transfer to the county facility unless you learn to stay in your lane. Which means following my protocols exactly. Not questioning chart decisions you don't have the credentials to understand. Not second-guessing my judgment. Are we clear? She doesn't answer. She just holds his gaze until he steps aside to let her pass, and when she walks out of that closet her pulse is steady and her hands are calm, though something behind her ribs is burning like a wire pulled too tight. 3 days pass like water through a sieve. Ashley works her shifts, takes her assignments, keeps her mouth shut in rounds. She doesn't make eye contact. She doesn't speak unless spoken to. She becomes the ghost he accused her of being. And then, on a Friday afternoon when both the day shift and night shift are present in the main lobby, overlapping for maximum audience, her pager buzzes. Ashley Cooper, report to main entrance. Ashley Cooper, main entrance. She knows before she even walks out of the stairwell what's happening. Ashford stands beside the security desk with a manila folder, at least 15 staff members within earshot, some pretending not to watch, others staring openly like they've been waiting for the show to start. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like insects, and the sound of voices around them suddenly feels very far away. Nurse Cooper, Ashford announces, his voice carrying across the lobby with the precision of a man who has done this before, who knows exactly how to make an announcement feel like an execution. This is official notice of demotion from trauma rotation to general floor duties, effective immediately. Your inability to follow established protocol has become a liability to patient safety. He extends the folder, holding it just far enough that she has to step forward, making her reach for it in front of everyone, making the gesture itself part of the punishment. She takes the papers without reading them. Her eyes stay on his face. A single tear escapes from her left eye, just one, sliding down her cheek in a line like a cracking glass, and she wipes it away with steady fingers, never breaking eye contact, never giving him the satisfaction of seeing her look away. A man who needs this much control, she says quietly, her voice carrying in the sudden silence like a knife finding bone, is usually hiding something much worse than what he accuses others of. The lobby goes so quiet you can hear the fluorescent lights humming their electric song. Ashford's smile doesn't reach his eyes. His jaw is tight. Parking lot, he says through his teeth. Now. Outside, as the night shift arrives and the day shift leaves, creating the perfect storm of witnesses, he hands her a second folder. This documents your insubordination just now. Your disrespect toward hospital administration. One more incident, Cooper, and you're done. Not transferred. Done. Terminated. Fired. The word hangs in the humid Jacksonville air like a threat. Ashley takes both papers and folds them with precise creases, one fold, then another, her movements deliberate and controlled. She slides them into her bag with the kind of care you'd use handling evidence. Her hand trembles exactly twice, the key slips from her fingers, clatters on the pavement, she has to bend down to retrieve it, but when she straightens her expression is neutral. Unremarkable. She walks to her car as whispers scatter behind her like startled birds, and she doesn't look back. 3 nights later, when the trauma alert screams through Oak Creek Memorial at 11:16 p.m., everything changes. Ashley is on the general floor, restocking the supply cart on the pediatric wing, which is punishment in its own way, being removed from anything that matters, when the overhead system explodes to life. Trauma alert. Multiple gunshot wounds. Naval base shooting. ETA for minutes. The words travel through the hospital like an electric current. Footsteps accelerate. Alarms cascade. The entire place shifts into emergency mode. Ashley doesn't move toward the ER. She remembers her demotion. She remembers the folder. She remembers that she's supposed to stay in her lane, which apparently means nowhere at all. The charge nurse, Derek, a 12-year veteran with kind eyes and tired shoulders, grabs her arm as he runs past. "We're short-staffed, I don't care what Ashford said, we need bodies. Now." It's not a request. It's a command. Ashley moves before her brain catches up to the decision, and by the time the ambulance bay doors explode open, she's already there. Paramedics rush in a Marine commander, dress uniform soaked with blood the color of old pennies, 3 visible gunshot wounds, chest cavity, lower abdomen, shoulder, and the ER resident, a young man named Marcus who has maybe 4 months of experience, freezes completely. His eyes go wide and his hands go limp and his brain simply stops processing information. The arterial spray from the chest wound is bright red and rhythmic, pulsing, and Ashley's entire body recognizes it before her conscious mind finishes forming the thought. She's at the bedside. Her hands are already moving. "Chest X-ray stat," she says, her voice suddenly different, not asking, commanding. "Get me a thoracotomy tray now. He's got a pneumothorax and we're losing him." The resident jumps. A tech runs. The machines are screaming their electronic song, monitor beeping in rapid arrhythmia, ventilator whooshing, for pumps alarming, and the patient's eyes are unfocused, pupils dilating, the grey-white face of someone whose blood pressure is collapsing. The attending surgeon is stuck in another OR with a complicated abdominal case and can't break scrub. For 14 seconds, everyone in that trauma bay is looking at Ashley. She looks at the scalpel tray. Then at the commander's grey, dying face. Then at her own hands, which are trembling, actually trembling, for the first time since she arrived at Oak Creek Memorial. 3 seconds of tremor. 4. 5. The room holds its breath. Through the observation window above the trauma bay, Dr. Ashford watches from his office, drawn by the commotion, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. He sets it down slowly on his desk and leans closer to the glass. Ashley closes her eyes. Takes one breath. And when she opens them, the tremor is gone. She picks up the scalpel, a size 15 blade, surgical steel sharp enough to part skin like paper, and the way her fingers find the handle is automatic, muscle memory carved into tissue and nerve over 14 years she's never talked about. She positions the blade at the 5th intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, the exact angle of 1,000 field operations in places where hesitation meant death, and she makes the incision with the kind of precision that belongs to someone who has done this before under mortar fire and worse. Blood spills across the blue drape. She doesn't flinch. She spreads the ribs with her fingers, feeling for the way they move, the resistance, the give, and her hands move like they're operating in a completely different war, in a different time, in a place where mercy and violence lived in the same heartbeat. The commander's daughter, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, bursts through the ER doors still in dress blues, demanding to see her father, and security has to physically position themselves between her and the trauma bay. She presses her face against the glass and watching the way this quiet nurse who delivers water pitchers moves with the terrifying fluid precision of someone who knows exactly where death lives and exactly how to pull someone back from its edge. Ashford doesn't move from the observation window. He just watches. And what happened next didn't just change everything. It ensured that he would never be able to hide what came before. 3 nights later, the overhead page crackles through Oak Creek Memorial like a rifle shot. Trauma alert, gunshot wounds, multiple casualties, ETA for minutes. The charge nurse's face goes pale. An ER resident freezes mid-documentation. The nurse's station erupts into controlled chaos, crash carts being wheeled into position, trauma bays being prepped, surgical teams being paged overhead. Ashley hears it from the pediatric wing where she's been reassigned to permanent night rotation, and her hand still anyway, muscle memory recognizing the cadence of incoming combat casualties even here, in Jacksonville, 1,000 miles from Tikrit. The base is only 6 miles away. Gunshots outside a naval facility means officers, means protocols, means someone didn't make it far. She doesn't move. She's not supposed to. Pediatric night rotation, badge restricted from ICU access, that's the order Ashford gave. But her hands are already moving, muscle memory older than compliance, and she's walking toward the ER before she even realizes she's left the pediatric wing behind. The trauma bay smells like antiseptic and fear when she arrives, that particular sharp scent of bleach mixed with the metallic undertone of fresh blood. 2 patients are already in Bay 1 and 2, lacerations, nothing critical, nurses handling them fine. Bay 3 sits empty and waiting, equipment lined up like instruments for a surgical orchestra. The charge nurse sees Ashley and hesitates. "You're pediatrics now." "I know," Ashley says quietly, and moves toward Bay 3 anyway, because some orders are written by men with office politics, and some orders are written by something deeper than rank. The ambulance bay doors slam open and paramedics come through fast, moving like they're carrying time itself in their hands. 1 stretcher. 1 patient. The man on it is grey-blue in a way that means catastrophic hemorrhage, his chest a map of blood, 3 entry wounds visible from 10 feet away, each one telling its own story of trajectory and velocity and the kind of violence that doesn't give warnings. His uniform jacket is soaked through, marine dress blues turned black by blood. The paramedic is already talking, words coming rapid fire, male, 42, 3 penetrating thoracic wounds, BP 72 over 40 and dropping, O2 sat 68, lost him for 45 seconds at the scene, got him back with 2 rounds of epi, he's gone again in the last minute, no pulse, ongoing compressions. The patient flatlines between stretcher and bed. His body goes slack in that way, that means the electrical system has shut down. The monitors scream in that particular electronic wail that cuts through every other sound in the room. The resident steps in and starts CPR, hands pumping the chest with mechanical precision, and the attending hasn't even arrived yet, and there are 6 seconds maybe before this man becomes a name on a death certificate instead of a patient who still has a chance. Ashley moves. She doesn't ask permission. She doesn't hesitate. Her hands grab a sterile thoracotomy kit from the crash cart, the same tool she hasn't held in 6 years, since a field hospital in Tikrit where the walls shook with every mortar impact and the surgery lights ran on diesel generators, and she had learned that the human body is just meat and blood and the will to survive. The scalpel feels like coming home. She's at the bedside in 3 steps, her voice dropping 2 octaves, becoming something crystalline and absolute. Stop compressions. Move. The resident steps back without question. There's something in her voice that transcends the normal hierarchy of the ER, something that makes the second-year surgical resident recognize that someone with actual authority just walked into the room. Ashley's hands are already moving through the prep, counting ribs, finding landmarks, her fingers reading the anatomy like Braille. The nurses move with her without being asked, already understanding what she needs because she's calling for it before she's even conscious she's spoken. 14-gauge needle, sternal approach, I need retractors, get me a basin for the pericardium. Her hands move like they're guided by electrical impulses older than conscious thought. The scalpel goes in at the 4th and 5th intercostal space, and the room goes absolutely silent except for the screaming heart monitor and the sound of her own breathing, even and controlled, the breathing of someone who has done this while mortars were impacting 50 meters away. Blood pools on the sterile field. She's not thinking about infection protocol right now. She's thinking about the fact that this man has 90 seconds before irreversible brain damage becomes the next problem she's solving. The ribs come apart. Her hands are slick with blood, but her grip doesn't slip. She's inside the thoracic cavity now, her fingers finding what she needs, the pericardium, the sac around the heart, and one of the bullets has breached it, causing tamponade, the heart drowning in its own fluid, unable to beat. She doesn't narrate what she's doing. The attending just arrived through the doors and is now standing frozen, watching a nurse in midnight blue scrubs perform open cardiac surgery with the precision of a trauma surgeon with 20 years of experience, her hands moving through the cavity like a violinist playing a piece from muscle memory. "Scalpel," Ashley says, and the nurse places a fresh one in her hand without hesitation. The pericardium opens under her blade and 400 milliliters of blood spills into the basin, and the heart beneath her fingertips suddenly has room to beat again. She can feel it before the monitor registers it. The electrical impulse returning, the ventricles beginning their work, the organ responding to her hands like it recognizes a command it understands. "We have sinus rhythm," a nurse calls out, and there's something almost like awe in her voice. But Ashley is already moving past sinus rhythm to the next problem, because the bleeding hasn't stopped, because one of the bullets has fragmented and created a secondary injury. She can see now that she's inside, and she's calling for sutures, for retractors, for more light, and the surgical resident is now standing beside her taking direction, and the attending is backing into a corner because whoever this woman is, she owns this moment in a way that doesn't include questions. 2 hours pass in what feels like 20 minutes. The commander's chest is closed under Ashley's hands, not her final surgery, that will come upstairs, but her emergency work is complete, and he's alive with a pulse that doesn't waver, with oxygen saturation climbing from that near-death 68 to 92 and holding, with vitals that indicate a man who is going to survive the next hour, which means he might survive the next 6 hours, which means he has a chance. The attending moves in to take over the closure, and Ashley steps back, and only then does she notice that her hands are trembling. Not from adrenaline withdrawal. From something else. From the fact that while she was working, while her hands were doing what they've been trained to do, she didn't think about being invisible. She didn't think about the cost of hiding. She just thought about keeping a man alive, and she did it, and now everyone in this room knows that she is not just a nurse named Ashley Cooper from the pediatric wing. The OR team wheels the commander upstairs for definitive surgical repair. The trauma bay is being cleaned, the blood mopped away with the efficient movements of people doing something they've done 1,000 times before. Ashley is standing with her hands at her sides, the tremor fading now that the crisis has passed, and Ashford is standing at the observation window above the bay, the window where he watched every minute of this surgery, his face the color of someone who has just watched the foundation of his understanding get torn apart. She meets his eyes across the distance and sees it register, the moment he understands that she isn't what he thought she was. That whatever he suspected, he didn't suspect this. He turns away from the window, and Ashley knows with the certainty of someone trained in reading tactical situations that he's about to make a call. Within 4 hours, her badge won't open the ICU doors. Within 6 hours, she's been permanently reassigned to pediatric night rotation with her access restricted from every critical care unit. Within 8 hours, she's standing outside the ICU entrance watching security guards check badges and thinking about the faded unit patch she glimpsed through the window of the commander's room, the one that matched hers, Tikrit 2nd Medical Battalion, the operation that officially never happened, and she feels the careful architecture of her invisibility beginning to crack. Ashford sits in his office that evening with footage of her trauma bay performance playing on a loop, and he picks up his phone. His fingers dial hospital administration. His voice is measured, professional, the voice of a man protecting an institution. "I need an expedited background check on Nurse Ashley Cooper. Security purposes. Something's not right about her credentials." He has no idea what he's about to set in motion. Within hours of the surgery ending, Ashford moved through the hospital's administrative corridors with the purposeful stride of a man closing a door he'd just cracked open. Ashley's reassignment paperwork was already drafted, already approved, already filed with the precision of someone who'd spent years perfecting the mechanics of institutional erasure. Pediatric wing. Night rotation only. Permanent effective immediately. Her badge, which had granted access to 3 floors just that morning, was reprogrammed to unlock only the children's unit and the staff bathroom on the east side, a cage within a cage, invisible by design. She stood at the pediatric supply closet that first evening, restocking for bags with the methodical focus that kept her hand steady and her mind quiet, when she heard the distant elevator chime. 2 hours into the shift. The ICU was 3 floors above her, and she'd already stopped allowing herself to check on the commander, stopped allowing herself to think about the threads that connected that room to a hospital in Tikrit that officially burned empty 6 years ago. The fluorescent lights hummed their constant drone as she counted doses, inventory becoming meditation, until her badge made a small clicking sound against the metal shelving and she realized she'd been breathing too shallowly. Through the sealed glass of the pediatric unit's corridor, she could see the main hallway beyond. A shift change was happening on the ICU floor. Nurses moving between rooms, the ordinary rhythm of hospital life, and then something else. Heavier footsteps. The sound of equipment that didn't match the hospital's acoustic signature. She moved to the window without thinking, her body remembering things her mind had learned to suppress, and what she saw made every muscle in her shoulders lock. For men in dark tactical gear moved through the ICU corridor like they owned it, their jackets open enough to reveal contractor badges, not government issue, not hospital security. The badges had the particular design of private military companies, the kind that operated in the grey spaces between legality and necessity. Her heart rate spiked in a way she recognized from combat, the sudden clarity that comes when your mind processes a threat faster than language can follow. Boots on tile, coordinated movement, hands positioned for rapid access to weapons. She'd trained with these kinds of operators before. She knew exactly what this was. The men stopped at the commander's room, and through the door's small window, Ashley caught a glimpse of movement inside. The commander, awake now, beginning to move despite his wounds, the medical data from his monitors visible on the hallway display. His vitals had been climbing steadily since morning. Strong enough to walk. Strong enough to run. Ashford emerged from his office like a man following a predetermined script, walking beside the contractors with his hands clasped in front of him, his voice carrying down the hallway with the surgical precision she'd come to recognize as his most dangerous mode. Room for 12, the patient is a security risk and the nurse who treated him has been flagged. I need both situations contained before morning. The words hung in the recycled air like a toxin. Contained. The word carried specific weight in military terminology, and Ashley understood immediately what Ashford meant by it. Remove the witness. Neutralize the liability. Make the problem disappear before morning rounds. She moved without deciding to move. Her body recognized the threat pattern before her conscious mind caught up, and the response came from 14 years of muscle memory, from a field hospital in Tikrit where the decision to act meant the difference between saving lives and watching them end. She stepped into the ICU corridor, her movement precise and unhurried, her body language communicating exactly what Ashford's hadn't calculated, that a person with nothing left to lose is not governed by the same rules as everyone else. The lead contractor's hand moved toward his holster, his eyes narrowing as he registered that the small woman in hospital scrubs was not retreating. This wing is restricted, he said, his voice carrying the flat certainty of someone accustomed to compliance. Step aside. Ashley planted her feet. The distance between them was 15 feet, and she'd covered worse distances under heavier fire. Her chin raised slightly, her voice dropping into a register that made one of the other contractors take an involuntary step backward. Not until I see credentials and a warrant. Ashford appeared behind the contractors, and for a moment, something flickered across his face, a momentary calculation, a recalibration of the scenario he'd constructed. Then his expression hardened into something that resembled certainty. Cooper, you're terminated effective immediately. Leave the premises now or I'll have you arrested. She didn't move. Her right hand moved behind her back, found the door handle to the commander's room and turned it. The mechanical lock engaged with a soft click. She pocketed the key. The lead contractor drew his weapon with the fluid motion of someone who'd done it thousands of times in training and dozens of times in reality. Ashley saw the muzzle point. She understood what was about to happen with the clear, distant certainty of someone watching a predetermined event unfold. Her body didn't flinch. Her eyes didn't blink. She'd survived worse than this. She just hadn't survived it while wearing a hospital uniform in a building full of civilians. The first bullet hit her shoulder, the impact spinning her sideways but not down. The round caught the junction between her clavicle and scapula, and the pain that followed was sharp and clarifying, a message her nervous system delivered in the language of arterial damage and collapsed muscle tissue. She stayed standing because staying standing was the only decision that mattered. The second bullet caught her side, just below her ribs, and the burning followed the trajectory of the round through tissue that was never designed to withstand this kind of trauma. Her hand braced harder against the door frame. The door held. The commander remained protected. The third shot came without warning, shattering her collarbone, and this time her body finally gave permission to fall. She slid down the door, her blood smearing across the small window in patterns that looked almost abstract, almost artistic, almost like something other than the evidence of a person choosing to die for someone else's survival. The weight of her body pressed against the door, sealing it, securing it, making it impossible for anyone to open what she was protecting. Through the glass, blurred now by the spreading stain of her blood, she locked eyes with the commander inside. He was awake, struggling against his full lines, his face contorted with the rage of a man watching someone else absorb the cost of his existence. She raised her hand slightly, despite the way the movement sent fire through her shoulder and side, and mouthed two words, "Stay down." The hallway erupted in sound. Lieutenant Chen's voice screaming from somewhere down the corridor, the distinctive acoustic signature of her fear somehow worse than the pain. Ashford saying, "Get her out of here, make this disappear," his voice already pivoting, already calculating how to reframe this moment into something more manageable, more containable. Radios crackling. Someone calling a code. The fluorescent lights humming their indifferent frequency as the world narrowed to a tunnel and then to nothing at all. She woke 3 days later in a different hospital, in a room she didn't recognize, with her entire torso wrapped in bandages that pulled with each breath and sent messages of significant internal trauma through her nervous system. Sunlight came through the window at an angle that meant afternoon, though she couldn't determine which afternoon. Her shoulder had been repaired with surgical plates, she could feel the hardware under her skin, the specific weight of it, the way it pulled at bone and muscle. The bullets had done their work thoroughly. One had nicked her subclavian artery. One had passed between her ribs without hitting lung. One had lodged against her scapula before being removed. She was alive in the way that sometimes happens when a person's cardiovascular system cooperates with their determination to survive. A cardboard box sat on the chair beside her bed. Inside, someone had carefully packed the artifacts of her invisible life, her cracked mug from the break room, the one with the faded hospital logo, the half-dead succulent from her locker, its leaves brown and curling, and a photograph of her unit in Tikrit, everyone in combat fatigues, everyone smiling at the camera except the person who'd held the camera. Every face except hers had been crossed out in red ink with the methodical precision of someone making a statement. The message was clear. The message was final. You are alone. Through the rain-streaked window, she could see a bus stop across the street, grey and empty, waiting like a door that led to nowhere. She understood in that moment what Ashford had calculated, that even if she survived, even if she recovered, even if she walked out of this hospital on her own 2 feet, she would walk directly toward disappearance. A discharged patient with nowhere to go. A woman with a box of possessions and a future that had been carefully designed to exclude her. This was how institutions disposed of problems, not with bullets, but with paperwork, with erasure, with the systematic removal of the infrastructure that made a person's existence official and recorded. The hospital room was very quiet. Outside, rain hammered the windows like a question she didn't have the strength to answer. 2 days after Ashford initiated the background check, the rain started, the kind that comes sideways through Jacksonville, hammering the employee entrance of Oak Creek Memorial like accusation. Ashley was restocking the pediatric crash cart on the 3rd floor when she heard it, boots on tile. Multiple sets. The kind of synchronized footfall that comes from people trained to move as one unit. She knew that sound. Through the hallway window, she counted them. 6 contractors in tactical gear, radios clipped to their vests, moving through the lobby with the precision of men who'd been paid to do something definitive. Their leader, a man with a shaved head and the dead eyes of someone who'd stopped counting bodies years ago, showed credentials to the front desk nurse, who immediately paled and reached for the phone. The background check hadn't taken 2 days to arrive at the Pentagon. It had taken 4 hours. And Ashford, panicking at what it contained, had made a choice that would cost him everything. Ashley moved down the stairwell without running. Composure was armor. She could hear the contractors entering the building now, their leader's voice crisp and authoritative as he asked for the ICU. The night shift charge nurse, a woman named Patricia who'd worked here for 11 years, was asking questions, demanding credentials. But her voice had the tremor of someone outgunned, and she was. The commander was on the 6th floor. Room 612. Ashley knew the layout like she knew her own heartbeat: north wing, eastern corridor, third door from the emergency stairwell. She moved through the hospital the way she used to move through Tikrit, silent, purposeful, already calculating angles and vectors. When she reached the ICU, the contractors were already in the hallway. The leader was speaking into his radio. "Secure the floor. No one in or out of room 612 until we have confirmation." His voice sounded like a machine that had learned to talk. Ashley stepped out of the stairwell directly into their path. She was still wearing her pediatric scrubs. Still looked like just a nurse. The leader's eyes passed over her for exactly 1 second before the training kicked in and he reassessed. Something in her stance. Something in the way she stood between him and the commander's door. "You need to move," he said. Not a request. A statement of logistics. "No." Ashley's voice was very quiet. Very level. The voice of someone who'd held a field hospital together while mortars fell outside, who'd chosen which wounded Marines would live and which ones wouldn't based on nothing but math and blood type and the distance a bullet had traveled. The leader's hand moved toward his holster. Behind him, the other 5 contractors spread into a tactical line, blocking the hallway from wall to wall. Ashley could count the magazines on their vests. Could estimate their training level by the way they held their shoulders. Could see the exact moment the leader decided she wasn't a negotiation. "Last warning," he said. Ashley stepped forward instead of backward. The first shot came from the contractor on the left. A 9mm round that entered her right shoulder and exited clean, spinning her slightly but not stopping her. Pain was information. Pain was data. She'd learned to read it the way other people read clocks. The second shot came before she could move. This one caught her in the ribs just above her hip, lower than the first, angling up through soft tissue. She felt her breath hitch, not from fear but from the simple physics of a bullet disturbing the cavity her lungs needed to function in. But she didn't fall. She took 1 step backward, placing her body more squarely in front of the door, and looked directly at the leader. The third shot came from the leader himself. A shot that shattered her collarbone, that lit her entire left side on fire, that finally, brought her down to her knees against the door to the commander's room, her blood smearing the small window as she fell. Through the pain that was blooming into something almost abstract, she locked eyes with the commander through that smeared window. He was moving toward her, pulling at the monitors, and she mouthed the words, "Stay down." Her voice had left her body somewhere around the second bullet, but her mouth still worked. "Stay down." Then the fluorescent lights tilted, and everything went the color of nothing. 3 days. That's how long she was gone before she woke up in a different hospital, not Oak Creek Memorial, but Shands, Jacksonville, in a bed that wasn't hers, in a room that smelled like antiseptic and the particular kind of silence that follows violence. Her left arm was immobilized. Her right arm had an four line running through the crook of her elbow. Her ribs were wrapped so tightly she could barely breathe without hearing the white noise of bandages shifting. And on a chair beside the bed sat a cardboard box. She didn't need to open it. She already knew what was inside. The cracked mug from the break room at Oak Creek Memorial, the one that said "World's Okayest Nurse" in faded lettering. The half-dead succulent from her locker, its leaves papery and brown, the soil a desert landscape. And beneath those, wrapped in a plastic bag, the photograph of her unit in Tikrit. She pulled the photograph out with her right hand, moving slowly, every nerve ending firing in a language of pain she'd learned to speak fluently. All the faces were crossed out in red ink. Every single one. Except hers. Hers was circled instead, isolated, marked as the only one who remained visible. The only one who'd survived to become a problem. The message was message itself. Someone had gone through the trouble of crossing out the rest, of sending her a box of the things that proved she'd ever worked there at all, of making sure she understood that this was erasure. This was what happened when you stopped being convenient. This was what the Pentagon did to soldiers who knew things that were supposed to stay classified. This was what Dr. Ashford did to nurses who made him afraid. Through the rain-streaked window of her hospital room, Ashley could see the bus stop across the street. Route 9. The bus that would take her north toward the I-95 corridor, toward whatever anonymity looked like, toward the kind of disappearance she'd already lived through once when the CIA buried Tikrit and told her to stop existing. She could get on that bus. She could walk away. She could let Ashford have his victory, let the Pentagon keep its secrets, let the commander heal up without any connection to her that might cause more problems for him. She could be gone by tomorrow morning. But as she looked at that photograph again, at the red ink and the isolation and the message someone had worked hard to send, something shifted in her chest. It wasn't the bullet wound. It was deeper than that. It was something that had been forming since the moment Ashford handed her the demotion notice in the parking lot. It was the accumulation of every time she'd stayed quiet, every time she'd made herself smaller, every time she'd accepted the role of just a nurse because that's what survival meant. Her phone sat on the bedside table. Someone had brought it here. Someone had thought it might matter to her. She reached for it with her right hand and scrolled through her contacts. Most of them were dead. Most of them had been struck from the record the same way the faces in that photograph had been. But there was one number she'd never deleted. One person who'd been there in Tikrit. One person who would remember that Major Ashley Cooper had existed, even if every database the Pentagon controlled said otherwise. The contact name was just an initial, M. She pressed the call button. The phone rang once. Twice. And then a voice she hadn't heard in 6 years answered with a single word, confirm. "It's Cooper," Ashley said quietly. "I'm calling in the marker." The silence on the other end lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then, "Where are you? And what do you need?" Ashley looked at the cardboard box. At the photograph with all those crossed-out faces. At the rain streaming down the window toward that bus stop where her erasure was supposed to happen. "I need to stop running," she said. "I need everyone to know what happened in Tikrit. And I need Dr. Martin Ashford to understand that some nurses don't disappear. Some of them come back." The voice on the other end, a voice belonging to someone who'd been watching her from inside government machinery for 6 years, waiting for this call, said only, "Give me 24 hours. And for the first time since she'd fallen against that door with 3 bullets in her body, Ashley Cooper smiled. The rain kept falling. The bus kept running. But Major Ashley Cooper wasn't getting on it. She was about to show the Pentagon, and Dr. Ashford, and everyone else who'd tried to erase her, that some soldiers don't stay disappeared. Like this story? Subscribe for more tales of hidden strength and unexpected heroes walking among us. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the quiet ones finally speak up. And tell us in the comments, would you have made that call or would you have gotten on the bus?